Hi, this is Real Estate with Alyse and Jay.
And that is Jay, and I am Alyse.
If you've been in the real estate business as a real estate agent for less than 10 years, then what we're going to talk about today is for you.
Yes, absolutely. So, me and Jay both have been in the business about 20 years, and we've seen ups and downs of the real estate market. And right now, we are starting to get into a little shift of the market.
Yep, that's right. The market's been shifting and it's been a crazy market this year with inventory and interest rates and all that kind of stuff. So where do you want to start?
So, let's take it back to the beginning and just kind of talk about how we both got started in the real estate business.
So when I started, it was back in the early mid 2000s, and that at that point it was a pretty decent market for buyers, and that's when everything was kind of going crazy, and that's preceding the mortgage meltdown, Great Recession, that whole thing. So that's back when there was like stated income, stated assets. The joke was if you could fog a mirror, you could get a mortgage loan. You remember that time frame?
Yes, yes, I do.
So that's kind of when I got started. I was kind of learning the ropes, and I immediately thought, in that big sense, like, hey, I would like to own a brokerage, and not just because I wanted to like be the boss or be in charge of something, but because I thought in my brain that's how we could create, I guess, a business is what I was thinking. Like we could bring on some other agents to work with us. We take care of them. We show them the ropes. Hopefully, it's a great relationship, and then that would eventually, when we were ready to stop, slow down, or retire, that would be a built out business that we could count on that income from it. And so that was kind of the idea of why I wanted to start a brokerage. So then we started the brokerage, and it was right before the big crash. And then we kind of made it through the crash, came out on the other side. So we saw the kind of the run up, then that shift with the mortgage crisis, and then another like little shift where it was kind of a buyer's market there for a little while after all the sellers had a short sale and do all that stuff with their houses. And then call it 2012-ish, that's what started the run up that ran until like 2021, 2022. And then we started seeing this shifting market now. And so in a nutshell, that's kind of how I got started. What about you, Elise? I mean, I know the story, but let them know, like, how did you get started and what was that like?
Yeah, I got my license because we were friends back in the day and you got your license. And so you said, why don't you? And I was like, why not? I had just graduated from college and had a job. I was working at a shipping company while I had my license, oil shipping company, and 2008 hit. And we were held with four big ships and nowhere to put them. And they were for Shell. And Shell was like, well, we're not going to buy those anymore. So we were out. And I always wanted to get into real estate full time, but I was just worried. So it kind of forced my hand to do it. And I did it. And me and you worked together and got me learning the ropes and all that good stuff. Of course, didn't know what I was doing at the beginning, but got in, buckled down, learned, and now here we are.
So would you say that was a blessing in disguise that all that came about?
100%. Yes, yes, yes. I had to get out of my own way in order to do it full time and to trust myself to make it in the real estate world. And it's been great. It's been wonderful.
What would you say, like thinking back on when you started, what was the biggest struggle or your biggest fear of like getting started in real estate?
Like a lot of people, I had mortgage and car payment, insurance, all that fun stuff. And I was like, well, if I don't sell anything, then what's going to happen?
Right.
And you're only good as your last paycheck.
And so when you're looking at that, what did we do? Do you remember to kind of get you started and going in the business?
Did Buffini and we sent out letters. Of course, we had our database. We started doing that kind of that stuff.
Back then, we were kind of working the work by referral.
Yes, we tried everything, but in the long run, the repeat and referral thing is the best thing that we did and that we've stuck to that works.
And so what about like, where did you find, like, I know for myself, my first client was like a friend from our neighborhood that needed to sell a place. So I'll give you a shot and we can help me sell my house. That one really opened my eyes because what happened was when he needed to sell, he was basically selling a rental house that he purchased the house for himself. And then about 2 or 3 years after owning it, he got promoted and moved around. So he ended up moving into the neighborhood that we lived in. And that's how we all met. But then basically when we go to sell it, he was trying to plan for his retirement and what was coming up in his life. And so he wanted to sell that property. And he said, okay, well, I got to go talk to the people that are renting it from me. He's like, that's going to be the hardest part of this whole deal. And I was trying to figure out why. So when I asked him, he's like, well, they've been renting it for me for the last 25, 30 years. And they basically paid off the mortgage for him. And here he was planning on his retirement, setting himself up and his family up. So he went to go talk with them and let them know that he was going to be moving, right? Or he was going to be selling the house. So I came over to, all excited to get my sign in the yard and get stuff going and all that kind of stuff. And here was this family, and I'll just kind of never forget it. But after 25 years, they're moving boxes to their car and they're putting stuff in storage. And basically, they had paid off the mortgage, but they were going to start over at some new place at some other house. And my friend even said they were great tenants. They paid on time. They took care of the house. Unless it was something major like the roof or the water heater, he never had to fix it or do anything about it. Hey, that was kind of an eye-opener for me. So I guess I was getting all that out to say, what about you? Like, what do you remember how you got started, what your first transaction was and how that came about?
My first transaction, I think, was my sister. And the other agent on the other side said, is this your first transaction? Because I didn't know what I was doing. So after that day, I promised that I would know exactly what to do for the transaction.
So a couple of things to note there is, and I think the numbers are something like 90% of agents get their first transaction from a friend or family member or a referral from a friend or family member. And so for you and I, that's been true for both of our stories here, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing worth noting then is that was back in the days when we thought earnest money was a guy. We didn't know he was was a check that had to go to the title company.
I don't know how I didn't know. And the agent, that's why she called me out. She was like, is this your first transaction? I'm like, yeah, how'd you know? She's like, you didn't know to take the option in earnest money to title. I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, just the easy things that we take for granted now. So that's why I like to teach other agents, because I don't want them to go through what I had to go through.
And I know, like, when you came on, it was during the Great Recession, the mortgage meltdown, that 2008, 9, 10-ish period.
That's when I went full time. Yeah, license 06.
So what was that like? Do you remember the feeling or how it was during that Great Recession period?
It was weird because I was still working at the shipping company full time, but I was doing some sales here and there. But you actually had to go through a lot more of that because I still had my full time job. But the reason of the recession, that's why I had to jump in full time. So it was like you said, it was a blessing in disguise for me personally, because that meltdown led to me actually going in full time at the worst time possible in real estate. But honestly, we started right away with reaching out to friends and family. There's somebody in your sphere that is going to have to move. So I do remember reaching out to friends and family, and a few people here and there needed to buy and sell.
That was also like a once in 100 something year event, right? It was called the Great Recession because it was borderline the Great Depression from the 1920s in terms of the way that mortgage meltdown came across and really shook the market up or really stopped the market in its track, the real estate market. And so I think another kind of lesson to learn or thing to point out for agents is that a normal shifting market, those are going to occur every, whatever that is, 10, 15-ish years, where the market's going to change because it just doesn't go on forever in one direction. But I think a lot of people get nervous and scared. And realistically, unless things are way, way worse than I understand them to be, '08 was like this anomaly that gets built up after a long time. There's reasons for the shift. And also another thing worth noting is that you came in during that time. And so by coming out of it, you're a stronger agent because there's a lot of agents didn't make it through that time. And I can seriously remember I had a friend that wanted to refinance a house that he had purchased, right? And it was an investment property. He had something like 100K in the bank. And this was probably February '08 or something like that. He couldn't get anybody to allow him to refinance that loan. Like he just couldn't get it. And it took almost 6 months before the banks opened up again. That's how kind of scary and nerve-wracking it was for people. The banks were going down and they stopped lending. They had to take a pause to figure out what was going on, which meant every transaction that you had lined up, if the buyer had a mortgage, they were on pause, right? Which meant the seller was on pause. That seller's typically moving somewhere, which meant where they were going was on pause. And then after that, sellers were short selling houses and cash for keys and all that kind of stuff was going on. It really was a lot different than now. But a historical price chart for US housing, it's got its ridges like that, kind of bumps up and down, but it kind of goes up. And then when you get to, can't remember, there's one earlier, but when you get there into 2008, it goes down and then climbs back up. And that's a big dip in that chart. Some people lost 50% of their home values during that time. So I just wanted to say we made it through there. We know we can make it through the next one, and just want to encourage all of you that you can make it through the next shift. You just got to kind of focus on the basics and those types of things. So now we're coming out of the Great Recession. Things are moving along again. I think the government started doing some sort of tax credit or tax break. Remember that? And then
I do.
Kind of helped buyers get off the fence. Come back into the market. And it was something like they were just going to give you $9,000 or $8,000. You could use it for closing or this or that or whatever. So that started to kind of bring it on. But at that point, it was a buyer's market. A buyer could go look at a house, shop around for 3 or 4 weeks, take a month off and come back and go look at that same house again and go, okay, well, maybe I'll do this, but 10,000 off asking and I'll take my closing costs. And sellers were going, okay. So that's a huge jump from where we are now. I would say stick it out, do what you can to improve your business, and then your market share, your gain is just going to shift. If you were selling 10 to 12 houses a year before this happened, and you write it out and stick with it, you'll be selling 18 to 20 houses a year when we come out of it. And that'll also be the run up for the next run. So you'll be in great position for the next 10, 12, 15 years. That market share is there to be gained for the agents that stick it out and ride through this tough time. And so you just got to make that decision to do it now. And of course, we love to mentor agents and help people avoid all the pitfalls and blunders that we made getting started and going through it. We could definitely take an agent and in 2 or 3 years, get them to where we were in 10 or 15 years easily. So just throwing that out there, if you ever want to run something by us or ask a question, we're open to helping out and seeing how we can help you or answer some questions on lead gen or what have you. Even just a contract review. We don't mind looking at something and just pointing something out. Anyway, I think that's plenty for today. Just trying to recap 20 years. I mean,
okay, everybody.
Well, thank you. And we'll talk to everybody soon.
Okay. Bye.